We've got a great group of folks here to talk through this amazing topic around how do we combine personality insights and technology to really drive amazing things for our organizations and the people that we're serving. I'm going to start with just a quick little introduction on Cloverleaf as well as today's topic, and then I'll let Kev and Sarah introduce themselves. Cloverleaf, we're on a mission to really help teams work better together by making everyday interaction smarter, more empathetic, and more effective. We do that by bringing personality insights into the daily tools where your employees or where work happens on a daily basis, with a focus of the goal around enabling real behavior change. A big part of that innovation is our partnership with Insights Discovery, which allows organizations to take the depth and richness of the Insights Discovery framework and activate it in a more continuous and practical way. Together, we're helping leaders embed these insights directly into the tools that they use every day and coaching moments so that teams can truly grow together. One of the organizations that is doing that exceptionally well is VGM, and we're happy to have Sarah here today. They've integrated personality insights into their internal systems and workflows, and the impact has been powerful. Increased engagement, stronger team cohesion, clearer connection between individual awareness and business outcomes. Today, you'll hear firsthand what that transformation looked like and what they learned along the way, as well as best practices that may have emerged in that process. So with that being said, let's start by welcoming our guests. Kev Dodwell, let's get started with you first.
Hi, Darren. Hi, Sarah. Thanks for having me on the call. So I lead product learning and innovation at Insights. I would say my job probably is basically to make sure that the power of personality doesn't just live in a workshop, but shows up in the tools and systems that people use every day. We're probably known, Insights is probably best known for our Insights discovery model and the language of color, which of course truly helps people, we believe, truly helps people understand themselves and each other. I'd say we probably think self-awareness is the key to personal growth. And I'm going to start today with a quote from the very famous Carl Jung that says, and I like this quote, I love this quote because it basically sums up what I think the struggle of self-awareness is all about, which is that everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of
Mhm.
ourselves. Just pause and reflect on that for a minute. Everything that irritates us about others can lead to an understanding of others. So more and more, I would say our work is not just about a report, not just about a great session. It's about becoming part of our partners' digital ecosystems. And I think that's what makes Cloverleaf and VGM and what you guys are doing with what we have with Insights Discovery so exciting. So yeah, happy to join today.
That's awesome, Kev. I appreciate it. As a father of three teenage children, I can truly, that quote from Carl Jung just hits me very
Right?
strongly today.
Right.
So great intro. Appreciate it. Sarah, let's transition to you. Maybe if you can give a little bit of background, not just on you, but also VGM, that'd be great.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me to on this meeting here today. My name is Sara Laures, and I'm coming to you from Midwest, actually in Iowa, where I serve as the Chief People Officer over a privately held company of around 1,600 people, and we're 100% employee owned, which sort of makes us unique. So being an ESOP is a wonderful way to recruit and retain really top talent. I was introduced to Insights Discovery back in 2004, and then I was introduced to Cloverleaf just more recently, probably a year or 2 years ago. So interesting that both of the platforms that I really love and are coming together, and so I'm honored to be asked to be a part of this. But my main job is really overseeing people strategy and cultural and engagement strategies, working very closely with our senior leadership team and our CEO to ensure that we've got a really engaged workforce and we can retain the very top talent that we have and recruit even the top talent all across the nation.
That's awesome, Sarah. Appreciate it. And thanks
Yeah.
again for taking the time today to talk about your experiences at VGM. I'm going to get us started today. First, just with Sarah and your experience with Insights. So I know that you've been using Insights Discovery for quite a while,
Mhm.
maybe even one of the longest histories within the Insights Discovery realm. So I think it might be good if we could just start from your perspective. What do you think's allowed Insights Discovery to stay so relevant at VGM and
Mhm.
impactful for what I believe is about 20 years or maybe even more than 20 years,
Yeah.
especially given all the organizational change you talked about. It's a fast-growing company. You did transfer to an employee-owned model. I'm sure there's been leadership changes over the
Mhm.
course of that tenure. Like, what do you think has allowed Insights Discovery to maintain such a dominant role and impact
Mhm.
inside VGM?
Yeah, from my perspective, I think it has to do with the establishment of like the common language. So we're very intentional. And the common language by that I mean like the talking around colors. Colors is a very common language that people identify with and they can associate behavior with. And so we do that at the 90-day mark. When somebody comes into our company after 90 days, they receive an invitation to take the Insights Discovery profile or assessment, and then they're invited to a training. So, no matter what you do at our company, you'll get the opportunity to learn more about yourself and then have the opportunity to learn more about how you maybe show up for others and interact on an average day and also under stress. And we talk about that intentionally. So, I think that having that platform in the common language that's easy to understand is just, it really flows very well into our opportunity to educate and develop people.
That's awesome. And I'm sure, I'll kick this over to Kev a little bit. From your perspective, obviously, Sarah talked about language and just kind of how important a common language inside an organization. And I think, especially in the space of culture and people, I'm assuming that's one of the key things that you've seen that has allowed Insights to make an impact for longstanding clients. But what else would you say has been a really powerful aspect of the insights discovery model that's really kind of allowed that to be a dominant force for such a long time?
Great question. Yeah, that's not uncommon. We hear that all the time, Sarah. It's that sticky language, isn't it? It's the ability that give people a way to in a non-threatening way to talk about something that maybe it's been bugging them, or possibly for the first time, it's the first time they've really understood why is it I don't get on with you, or why is it I
Hmm.
do get on with you? It feels very memorable. It feels very human. So that's something that I think we hear all the time. And it's great to hear, Sarah, you talking about that becoming, after the 90 days, becoming that cultural language, that shorthand for saying, oh, I get it. You are, you show up like this or you show up like that. And I've got a means in which to do that. I think the second thing, though, Dan, that I build on that would probably be, under that simplicity is depth, right? So, because if it were just simple, if it were just easy, if it didn't have any substantive quality underneath it, then I don't think it would last as long. It would be probably like a few other unmentionables who we love in the marketplace who are similar to us in some ways. I think it's for me, it feels like that depth because I think as our customers grow, as they move from self-awareness to maybe team dynamics, they maybe move on to leadership and change and possibly conflict. Sarah, you talked about some of that stuff about, how you intentionally show up we say sometimes on a good day or on a bad day when you're under stress.
Hmm.
So I think the fact that the model is robust enough to get challenges that are a bit more complex and it's not a gimmick, that gets grown out of. I think that's really useful. And I think the third thing, if I may add one, is we've stopped expecting the learning to live only in the workshop. So of course, that's often it's a very common place for the journey to begin for people. But I think through digital partners like yourself, Darren, and the APIs, some of those more teachable moments now can show up in the tools for which, has got us excited about working with you. And I'm sure that's one of the reasons that Sarah's trying to extend that learning experience beyond just simply that 90-day workshop or whatever that might be.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I do think, obviously, the learning industry as a whole, right, the profession, is being impacted by really kind of that like third piece that you talked about, right? I mean, obviously, the two-sided coin of simplicity with the depth of the product. But then really, it's about how do we evolve to kind of reach people where they're at and look at kind of uh, adult learner theory and the digitization and a lot of the things even with AI that's kind of coming into the space. I'm assuming that's part of the synergy that you saw in taking insights discovery and integrating it in some really powerful ways with Cloverleaf. But what sparked your interest to explore that partnership at a greater level?
Yeah, it's good. I mean, fun fact, we used to use the word simplexity. We were at a conference once, and there was a lady who had a hearing device, and people were talking about the complexity and the depth as well as the simplicity, and she genuinely thought she heard the word simplexity, and everyone's like, no, that's not what was said. But we were like, but we love it. That's a great word. So often you'll hear us talking about simplexity. Look, Darren, I think for us, the synergy is that you guys were already doing something that we care deeply about, which is getting meaningful coaching into the flow of work, where you're putting coaching in front of people in the tools that actually they use every day rather than just ask them to go somewhere else to learn. And that absolutely lined up perfectly with what we wanted to do with Discovery Next. After the brilliant event, how can we support people quietly in their everyday? But I think also we have complementary strengths, don't we? We have a personality model with a language, which lots of organizations like Sarah's. By the way, Sarah, I definitely want to work for an employee-owned business. That sounds fun. That sounds cool.
It
Um,
is.
but I think those organizations trust us and use us at scale. And what you have, what Cloverleaf brings, is this really smart digital engine that reaches across thousands of teams. And you put those two together, and we're not reinventing the wheel, are we? But we are multiplying the impact of a wheel that's already rolling, I would say.
That's awesome. We've had a couple of questions come in, and I think this could be a really great
Hmm.
spot to ask at least one of those, and we can double back on the other. But one of the questions came in from Helen, and she asked about the workshop that you mentioned, Sarah, and following kind of the insights assessment. Are there any other follow-up application process? So one, what does the workshop entail? And then two, are there follow-up application processes to help employees make sense of their results and integrate that in their work? And part of the reason why I think this is a good space to ask that question is just because I think it is a really great place to potentially highlight the power of bringing that insights discovery model and the language of that into kind of what Cloverleaf can do with the post workshop piece. So maybe if you can talk a little bit about what that looks like, I think that could be a great way to look at that from the practitioner's perspective.
Yeah, great question. Thank you, Helen. We actually have invested in certifying 4 of our employees to be actually discovery practitioners. And so they are fully equipped to lead workshops. And I don't know that you have to be a practitioner necessarily or certified to do that, but they deeply understand the insights discovery results. And so we take them through a workshop that involves a deep dive into their own results, but also collaborating with the people, their peers in the workshop to sort of go through even like role playing and conflict management and how do you work through a situation or what's your general tendency on a good day or versus a bad day. So there's a lot of scenarios that we work through. And also they leave with quite literally the physical color blocks, right? They look like Legos. I don't know if that's something that Insights Discovery sells, Kevin, but
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
okay. So everyone has those, and in fact, people have even taken a black Sharpie and put their percentages on each of their blocks. And so when you go into a workspace, you see everybody's colors. And so before you even engage on a personal level, you can sort of level set and be like, oh, I see that blue block at the top, or I
Yeah.
see that red block at the top. I'm going to be be brief, be gone, if that's my intention. But equipping people with the tools of like, hey, when you see this and you behave or you're interacting with somebody who maybe predominantly leaves with red or with blue, here's just some insights to how to get the best interaction around that. I also saw in the chat from Reggie wondering about that 90-day mark, and really it is by design, but also we throw a lot at you, and every company does when you're a new employee. So it's just sort of like we wait 90 days just to let that period of overwhelmingness and that onboarding and the training and the new information and all the things that come at you to sort of die down. And we believe at the 90-day mark, we've sort of found that sweet spot of like, okay, I understand my job now. The company's going to show me that they value me enough that they're going to invest in me and learn. I'm going to learn something about myself that I can even use at home with my family, but I can also, use daily in my interactions with my colleagues. So
Yeah,
hopefully
Yeah.
that
let
answers
me
that.
build on that a little bit as well,
Yeah.
Sarah, because that question that you asked Helen is it's eternal almost, which is, you've invested a lot with practitioners and some of those learning job aids and everything else that goes with the paraphernalia of introducing the language of color. And then people always say, well, what next? How do I keep the learning alive? How do I keep the message alive? So it sounds you're doing like a brilliant job at VGM to do that. I think that's what inspired us to say, and this is what I love again about your question about synergies, Darrin, is that inspired us to create these APIs. If you don't know what an API is, it's just a small piece of code that allows basically that when you've completed the profile, that data to be shared in platforms like Cloverleaf. So, what's great about the Cloverleaf platform, and I'm trying not to oversell it, Darrin, because I think you guys have done a brilliant job already, but it's good. It's really good because it scales that coaching conversation beyond just a simple workshop. And we just wanted to empower partners around the world, even our own clients, to enable that to fully embed that data into experiences so that user experience could be seamless. It's just not an assessment thing anymore. It's not a coaching tool. It's Cloverleaf, and underneath the hood of that, in this case, is it's powered by Discovery. So I love that because
Yeah.
it meets, I think, what the type of things you're talking about, Helen.
Yeah, Kevin, I appreciate that. And Sarah, maybe if you can talk a little bit more, and I can, because Helen did ask a follow-up question around kind of replacing the in-person versus, really kind of supplementing what's happening inside of those workshops. Maybe if you can talk a little bit about the use of Cloverleaf to really kind of take that outside of just the workshop or the classroom. Obviously, you mentioned the blocks, and I think that does a really great job
Mhm.
of really kind of giving you that kind of quick um, you know, quick look at, hey, this is likely some things, but oftentimes, again, the depth on that might be missing, especially over time as you kind of get further away from a workshop or further away from a debrief. So, what are some of the ways that VGM has incorporated Cloverleaf to really kind of help bring that to life?
Well, I think the integration with Microsoft Teams has been pivotal and instrumental to just have that be a repetitive thing that shows up every day. I get my coaching tips for the day at 7:30 in the morning every single day. One about myself, a self tip, and one about a colleague that I'm probably going to interact with for the day because it looks at my calendar. So it really does help me prepare to have a better day and to have some insight. And it sort of, I think it's meaningful because it helps remove that preconceived notion or a bias that might creep in prior to a meeting or some interaction with a colleague or a peer. So I think it's been instrumental to have that it integrates with Teams. And also we've got a team that is a Google team, and so I know it integrates with help me out with what is the
Yeah,
word?
Google Workplace. Yeah,
Oh,
the
Google
Google. Yeah.
Workplace. That's been huge as well. So just having that technology piece has been pivotal, I think, and why the user adoption is so high.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And I do think your point about Google versus Microsoft or Slack versus
Hmm.
Teams, right?
Hmm.
What we find is a lot of organizations, like yours, Sarah, have multiple platforms that they're operating in. And so, we've tried to build, tools that easily integrate with, a host of different platforms so that you can really kind of navigate across technical differences to still really be able to provide that coaching in a really powerful way. And, back to Helen's question, one of the things that she asked about is really, does it replace that in-person workshop? And I don't think anything that we're talking about is replacement. And I think it's really more about how do we layer interventions? How do we layer learning approaches to really help people not just know themselves and know others in a really powerful way, but really impact kind of how they're approaching a meeting or a conversation because our integration isn't just with Teams, it also supports calendar, right?
Hmm.
So getting
Yeah.
those little insights before people walk into a meeting or you also mentioned role play, Sarah, and that's a really powerful feature that we're rolling out here this month to
Mm.
really allow you. So even outside of the workshop, and I think it's great that you're doing it in the workshop, but sometimes, a month, 2 months down the road, that manager, may have forgotten some of those concepts. They may not, that may not necessarily be something that is just natural to think about role playing a conversation before
Right.
they deliver hard feedback. And so part of what we want to do is incorporate a role play capability as well that incorporates those insights, discovery, the language of colors into that. And so we're going to see even more of those features and capabilities coming here in the next month or two. So at least wanted to highlight the fact that it's not replacement. And hopefully, Sarah, that's your experience at VGM, that it's not about replacing in person or it's not about replacing people in that process, but it's more about how do you leverage the digital tools and techniques to supplement and add to. Is that your
Definitely.
experience as well,
That's it.
Sarah?
I would say that's very much my experience. And also I would just add on that after COVID, having a more remote workplace has presented challenges and opportunities. But with that and the technology of having people join us remotely, and getting to know people on that human level, I think the insights discovery allows for that. And the technology certainly helps, but just being able to better support that remote workforce and make them feel part of something, not just their home office and their day-to-day job, but feeling like, hey, I'm a part of this bigger team and this is my style and my approach to everyday life and everyday work has been really meaningful.
Yeah. So let's piggyback on that a little bit more as well, Sarah. So, talking about that blend of human practitioners, digital delivery, we've talked about embedding insights through the use of the API. And really the workshop is just kind of a starting point to a conversation. How do you wire that into your, all of your digital people practices, your digital people ecosystem, for lack of a better term, when you think about the technology? I mean, we've talked about Teams, but where are there other people practices or other technical capabilities that you either A, love to see insights, discovery, and Cloverleaf be a bigger part of, or that you're already actively making it a part of today?
Um, I think that we are using it. Well, there's one meeting in particular I can think of every week. Every Friday, I have this regular reoccurring meeting, and we kick off every single meeting with an an exercise around Cloverleaf. Share one insight that's been meaningful to you this week and tell us why it was meaningful. So I think, leaning into that technology and how it shows up for us every day and then applying it regular on a regular cadence has been really meaningful to us. Um, but it also allows for us to sort of break down something that might feel a little woo woo, like for people who maybe don't want to get into their feelings that much. Like this is just more of a common language and something that everybody has the opportunity to go through. Um, whether you lead with whatever color you might lead with. You don't have to just lead with green to be able to talk about, your natural tendencies. But I think at that meeting in particular, that's what's coming to mind is like, that's a really cool opportunity that we do on a regular basis, and we lean into the digital aspect of the insights that are revealed to us weekly. Um, that's just kind of what comes to mind for me, Darrin.
Yeah, no, I really love the part that you talked about around, hey, not everybody is woo-woo or they're
Yeah,
excited to talk about, you mentioned feelings, but even just taking the time out of their day to, think intentionally
yeah.
about other people, right? That's not a natural thing, I think, for a lot of folks. And, coincidentally, we have a lot of technology, a lot of product teams that maybe kind of lean into that a little bit more than maybe, let's say, marketing or sales per se. And when you think about those places where digital technology might actually open a conversation that wouldn't naturally occur, have you seen examples where the technology might open somebody up to a conversation or a thought that maybe they wouldn't have had normally, right? Because of exactly what you talked about, they're just natural styles or the natural approaches
Mhm.
doesn't have them thinking about that regularly.
Yeah, I actually have a real example of one of my peers, a fellow senior leader who runs a huge business unit and department here at my company. I remember when I introduced Cloverleaf, he sort of gave the like another assessment kind of. That was his reaction, like, I've got assessment fatigue, I don't want to take another assessment. And I was trying to explain, the more you interact with Cloverleaf, the more it's going to learn you and the more insights it's going to provide to you. Well, he totally ate crow, and I was really impressed by how he reflected on that, because he came to a meeting and he said, boy, was I wrong. I had no idea this would be this helpful. And I was resistant at first, I'll be honest. I just thought it was another assessment. And we already get asked to do all these assessments. But when I actually did it and I started getting my daily tips, like, he was like, Sara, I, I am so glad that you brought this to VGM, and it's been super helpful and insightful. And so I really saw that as a meaningful time. And user adoption, but also just acceptance of the platform and digital technology of like, wow, this is really meaningful. Because this was a guy that's very busy and would not normally give the time of day to something like this. So it won him over in a real way. And that cascades down, right? As a leader, if it's meaningful to you, it's going to be meaningful to the people you lead.
Absolutely. All right, I'm going to transition a little bit and I'm going to come back to a couple of the questions that are in the chat. But
Yeah.
Kev, when you think about the response from Insights customers beyond VGM and Sarah's experience, what's the impact of our tools joining together, kind of across the your client landscape?
Oh, really positive, Darren, really positive, quite energizing actually. I think from our own teams and clients, the big theme is the impact feels more sustained. When discovery is just a workshop, sure, you get the big ahas and then real life creeps in. The comment and conversation earlier about, is it replacing the human? Absolutely not. As an ex-facilitator practitioner myself, I just can't be in all places at all times. And so I think that what we're hearing is that language of it keeps it alive for longer. I think Scott in the chat said something similar as well. People have been asking for something like this. And sure, Insights is developing that stuff, but why wait when we've got the ability to jump on the back of the partnering with yourself and all the great work that you guys are doing? So in meeting prep, in emails, calendar, team spaces, whatever that looks like. I think the other impact is when you put the power of discovery next to the power of Cloverleaf, the coaching conversations, the tips, or whatever it might be from those services, and you guys do some great stuff in that space. What we've heard is it feels weirdly spot on, right? People tell us this isn't generic advice. It actually sounds like it knows them and their team. And of course it does because it's powered by the same engine that we get that same reaction from discovery profiles. So it's not just some random quiz that they filled in last week, or Sarah was saying, oh, geez, it's another profile that I have to have to put in. I think from our partners, so out with the direct customers that we have, and that we have something called a partner channel where we license people to deliver insights discovery across the world. For them, this is about the response we're getting for them is about scale, Darren. They see this as a way to scale themselves. The platform does the heavy lifting, of course, reinforced by that sort of insight tips day to day, which means I think as a human being, we're all pretty time poor, aren't we, at the moment? The hope is, and the feedback we seem to be getting is that people can focus on that deeper work, maybe those tougher conversations, the grit that lies in the team dynamics, and the sort of change journeys that we're all having to face right now.
That's great. I'm going to go to a question that Stephen asked in the chat, and Sarah, if you can't see that, I'm just going to read it out for those
Okay.
that maybe watch the recording later. But is there an expectation on your people managers to help individuals have an ongoing journey and conversation with the insights profile? And if so, how much training or support do your people managers get to help them facilitate this day to day with their teams? And then what does that look like? Great question, Stephen.
Great question. Yeah.
Very good.
We are intentional with keeping it ongoing and part of our common language. You don't just hear about it at that 90-day mark as a new employee. So we have something where it's called a monthly, like a leadership training over lunch hour. So once a month, you have the opportunity to dive in and actually join a web-based learning opportunity over your lunch hour. We actually offer them every single month. So there's 12 throughout the year. And our requirement of people leaders is to attend at least 6 of those and then to actually submit to your leader 2 takeaways that you found insightful or helpful. So there's some accountability back to people leaders, but that's an intentional way we kind of keep it alive and part of an expectation, if you will, to those people leaders. Keep it
That's
as an
awesome.
ongoing journey.
Yeah, that's great. And Kev, I'll ask a follow up on that. I mean, what else have you seen from your other clients, in addition to maybe some of the examples that Sarah gave that might also be helpful for Stephen or others on the call today, to really kind of keep that ongoing conversation alive?
Well, I think when you think about the content that's rich in discovery, if that's the assessment that you're using on the Cloverleaf platform, often what people do is it's a bit like a I don't know what that would be in the States, like a is it Six Flags, Nine Flags? There's a number of flags that people that go to one of
Six
these
Flags. Yeah.
like theme parks. And when you go through the door, what tends to happen is you go for the big rides, the big dippers or whatever it might be, the very scary rides. Everybody rushes to those and you stand in a queue for hours and you get some fun out of it, right? But there's also spaces in those parks where they're a little bit more serene, a little bit more cerebral, maybe more bit more cognitive, reflective. But not many people often go to those. Usually they've gone to them when they've spent too long on the big rides and they need a bit of a break. And I say sometimes with discovery and the content that's in this, a little like that. People often go to the value to the team or the communication do's and don'ts, or even the management chapter, some of that content that's in there. But there's some deep, rich content in there that is pulled out from the algorithms that you guys select from, such as the blind spots page, which is very uncommonly used, I would say, or the ideal environment. Of course, the environment these days is not a physical thing necessarily, as it's like where do you work most effectively? Or some great questions there around performance improvement, some really challenging questions around how you might show up, and were you aware of that? So I think keeping the learning alive through the combination of those two things, and for leaders in particular, that could be very useful to understand how to get the most out of those people. How to really, it costs a lot to hire people, so keeping them there through that engagement and that personal development investment in their future. I think that's the bit I would add, Darren.
Yeah. I think we've talked a lot about kind of layering engagement around learning. I think that isn't just self-serving, right? For, Kev and Insights or us at Cloverleaf. I think part of the reason why we care so much about that is if there is ongoing engagement around that, right? Like people and the dynamics that we experience on a daily, weekly, monthly basis can change quite dramatically, right?
Mm.
And so part of the reason why we're I think emphasizing or having so much of this conversation be focused on that is because how we interact and engage with each other and our ability to really kind of adapt our behaviors to support that is really powerful in terms of our ability to, either as a manager or leader, be effective, or as, a member of a project team to really
Totally.
kind of navigate some of those challenges. And, Sarah, I'll ask this question to you. What have you learned at VGM about really driving that learning engagement over time? And, obviously we've talked about some of the strategies and just in terms of like how Cloverleaf helps support that, but also even things like the physical blocks as a way to kind of remind people. But what advice would you give other HR people leaders who want that same kind of sustained engagement and ultimately beyond the sustained engagement, like behavior change and higher
Yeah.
performance and better skilling, right? So like what are you seeing there and what kind of advice can you offer those on the call today?
Yeah, great question. I think it's all about intentionality. You have to carve out some time and space for learning. Whether you hire somebody that works in the L&D space and offers, creates curriculum or uses insight curriculum that's already, established, you have to be intentional with that because learning isn't just going to happen. But creating the spaces for the learning to happen is really, I think, my biggest recommendation. There's a lot of key things you can do. I know internally we tell people how to set up their Outlook signatures, and part of that is the opportunity to include your colors under your signature, so that when you're interacting with colleagues, you immediately see, oh, they lead with red or whatever it is. We have an L&D wall within our headquarters that people can walk by and sort of interact with and sort of just get an added nugget of insight. But it's with detention in intention and by design that the learning takes place, and we make it sort of on demand. Like whenever you want a little nugget, like it's easy to consume. So that's my recommendation is to like foster an environment where that with intention, where the learning can happen on demand and with purpose.
Yeah. I think part of that too, right? So we're saying that awareness, these opportunities to practice this, these reminders or nudges about these differences and kind of how we navigate that is for, individuals' sustained growth and development. But when you look at that, I think you said VGM's about 1,600 employees. When you look at that in an aggregated way across a workforce of that size, when you think about, kind of measuring the impact of the investment that you've made in insights discovery as well as Cloverleaf over time, what are some of the specific metrics, stories, examples, behaviors, right, that help you evaluate the success of, these tools and, the kind of embedded learning techniques that you're employing?
Well, I think one of the things that I have been responsible for in my career here at VGM is creating project teams or stretch assignments, and I think that the technology has been really helpful to lean into what's going to make a successful project team and finding people who show up in different ways and having a diverse project team is using the technology to help form project teams has been really helpful to me. Also, I'm really intrigued with how the platform can potentially recommend, I'm going to say mentor, but I'm not sure if that's really what I mean, but maybe like somebody to partner with to get better on both sides of the spectrum. That's sort of been real life use examples that have been really helpful to me is the creation of project teams to drive a project forward or get to a place of success. And then also just partnering people for betterment and overall professional betterment, leaning into the technology and the insights that it provides to us.
That's great.
Mhm.
All right, I'm going to switch gears a little bit. Kev, when you
Mhm.
think about, and from your perspective, anything on the horizon at Insights and or our partnership with Insights, that excites you about the future of personality insights?
Hmm. That's a big question, Darren. I just want to, before I answer that, I just want to come back to the point about stickability of and the sort of how do you make things last? Because I think that's an eternal question, as well as learning impact metrics as well. I would say to people, if to know and not to use is to not know at all, right? If you have that information and you don't do anything with it, then what's the point of having that information? And I genuinely think what's happening here is you're reminding people to use and therefore to take that knowledge and apply it somehow. But still, I love, Sarah, what you said about people. You have to be intentional. In fact, if I've heard you say one word more than any other during this podcast, I would say you're doing this intentionally. You're creating a curiosity of learning. And then through that curiosity, I love that story you told of the individual who was like, here we go, another assessment. And then after a while, they were like, do you know what? That was really good. So they used it, they learned, they were curious, and something changed, something shifted. And I think that's where we need to get people to. We need to get people to move beyond just, like e-learning or something like that, and to into applying in the space that they're in. So what I would say though, in terms of the things that I'm curious about over the horizon in general and specifically with Cloverleaf as well, Darren, I just want to say right now that insights will always be human first. Our job is not to replace like great practitioners or leaders with clever tools. No matter how clever you get, Darren, we are not planning to replace the human being. What we're trying to do is through partnering with organizations like yourself and offer through our customers like Sarah at VGM, is to give them better mirrors and better maps. If we didn't mention AI, I think people on the call who might groan and roll their eyes right now, like, oh, another chat about AI. But well, it's disrupting the learning space. If you're sitting there thinking, oh, it's coming, it's here. Like it's already here. And there's something about be curious and find out about that stuff. For our point of view, my personal views, we only see that as an amplifier rather than a substitute. I think I think if the underlying learning is shallow, then all that AI does is just help you deliver shallow learning faster, just a lot quicker. But what I do get excited about is what that reasoning power of AI can offer us, to really surface those richer learning, self-aware moments in the need, in service of the real human conversations. Again, to quote Jung, if you make until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Um, we want to help people move away from that. We want to help people put themselves in control of their future and be all that they can be. Beyond that, I think there's a lot going on in ed tech, immersive technology. We've dabbled ourselves at Insights with VR, and that scenario based playing out, using AI to act as a third party, as a foil to your persona and get you to practice stuff so it doesn't feel quite so intimidating. And I think again, there'll be partnerships with other companies, yourself included, Darren, that will probably bring that to the marketplace a lot quicker than we do because we don't see ourselves as experts in that space. We just see ourselves as integrating into that space and bringing that to our customers for sure. But I think that overall, I would say the biggest thing is personalization of learning. If I can be so bold, I would probably add, maybe controversially, I think we need to think harder about where learning lives. I think conventionally, most learning is trapped behind the corporate firewall inside an LMS or an LXP. We have them, by the way. In fact, we just invested in a new one, and they are useful. They are useful for compliance and all the rest of it, but not always great for where real behavioral change happens. If I think about where my kids, mine are a bit older than yours, Darren, but where my kids learn, it's TikTok, it's Instagram, it's YouTube, it's anywhere but a firewalled LLM or a LMS, learning management system.
Yeah.
So I don't think, I'm not entirely sure that's where real learning happens. And I am excited to figure out with yourself and others about where that shows up, right? Wherever that is, wherever people work. That's the bit that's exciting me and in keeping me awake at night at the moment.
Yeah, no, it's great. And I do think since you broached the topic of AI, I wasn't the one. I just want to go on
Yeah,
record
you
that
have my
initiated
full
that.
permission, Darren, to talk about
Um,
Cloverleaf's AI.
I do think though, like this is a great example where our values really kind of came into alignment because, you mentioned human first
Yeah,
always. And
yeah,
I think especially when you think about the application of AI in a learning context, right? So this is all about how do we make humans better. It can't be an easy button on doing something, right? Because it's really about the process of learning and how does AI help accelerate that and get people to new places. So it is always going to be about the people,
100%.
and AI can't be a replacement on that. So like that's a place where our value system between the insights discovery team and model and Cloverleaf, I think lines up well. Sarah, I'm going to kick this question to you. When you think about AI, not just in learning, but obviously that's, I think, a big part of the interest for the folks who are attending today. But just when you think about like people practices and how you're enabling and empowering people to be better. What's been your experience of VGM with introducing those tools and how it can kind of help people, accelerate not just the work that they're doing and the contribution they're making to the organization, but being better people and being better teammates to each other.
Yeah, really interesting. I'm reminded of the we've got an L&D manager on staff. Doesn't matter if you do or don't, but my recommendation would be to equip somebody or challenge somebody to become sort of that thought leader and to bring some education forward to people. Actually, right after this webinar here, I'm jumping on to a training that's going to be about learning around about HR prompts in AI.
Great.
Because and we're going through like actually be having like classes that are designed to like learn how to best use AI in real use cases in your job. So we've got a variety of different classes offered. This one happens to be in HR prompts, but there could be something that lives in like a call center prompt or things like that. So designing learning to meet people where they are and to best help them with technology. If like when we first launched Copilot, that's what we use for AI in our organization. Without that learning and development piece attached to it, I think it would have fallen flat. People wouldn't understand it. They wouldn't know how to use it. But providing best use case scenarios and real life examples of how it can make your life easier and better and make you more productive has been a game changer. And so just be super meaningful around that.
Yeah, and I'm gonna put another little plug in for Cloverleaf on that front because, I think one of the criticisms that AI has gotten, I think especially for people who have really found the power of AI, whether that's ChatGPT or Copilot or,
Hmm.
whichever tool you're using, is that it starts to, for those who are heavy users, they start to actually check their brain, right? For even just kind of common tasks or even higher level strategy. And I think oftentimes, one of the biggest challenges with AI, whether you're just getting started or even, maybe you're a more experienced power user, is like, are you asking the right questions, right? You
Right.
use the term prompt. And I think one of the things that we've done really, really well, and I don't know that people have really fully experienced the power of it, is really kind of prompting people with the right questions to ask, right? Taking all of this data, understanding, who the person is, and then really recommending, we call them smart prompts inside the application, or, that gets pushed into Microsoft Teams to say, hey, these are questions that you should be curious about. And I think that's one of the things that I think as the technology evolves, and when I say the technology, I mean more broadly AI, how can we help people be more curious? Because at the end of the day, if we're just going for answers all the time, it actually makes us less curious and
Hmm.
probably less creative and less, thoughtful.
Hmm.
Um, But a big part of what we are attempting to do is help people with those initial questions to say, hey, these are things that you should be curious about. So hopefully we're
I
a
love
part
that.
of that workshop this afternoon. But if not, there's plenty of great tools out there. And I think offering suggestions and recommendations on specific prompts that people can engage with is amazing.
So
I,
someone
I
gave me a great tip. I say it's a great tip. It could be like the worst tip I've ever had. But I'll offer it to you anyway, which is if you're not sure, if you're just starting out on that journey of prompting, there's this wonderful thing called AI that can help you create a better prompt.
yeah,
And as soon as
for
somebody told
real.
me that, I was like, well, of course. Why would I expend my cognitive power trying to figure out what that looks like? So maybe that's a cheat for you this afternoon, Sarah, as you head into that session. Just
There you go.
ask the AI to help you get a better prompt.
I will say that I have a bit of a caution that I share with my team. Is like AI is a great tool, but don't let it replace your brain.
No, no,
Don't
no.
use it as a crutch.
Because it can hallucinate, right? It
It really
hallucinates
can, and it can,
dreadfully.
right, and it almost could de-skill you.
Mm.
So be careful when you interact with AI and don't let it think for you.
You
I
know,
always,
when we started off looking at AI at Insights, the first thing we did was we thought there must be a load of content about our intellectual property and our model out in the domain. You know how the
yeah,
AIs are trained on that public data. And sure enough, it did. But what we then started to find was that it sort of made up stories about
it
what was out
does.
there. So
You have
so
to be
then
very careful
we had to go in and help it understand exactly what the model was. So
how
that's a good
interesting.
learn, I think, as well.
Yeah, that's very interesting.
Yeah, Ollie has a question here too, just about how we are blending AI and personality data. And I think one of the great ways that we've done this is integrating with tools like Workday to come alongside of well places where people are providing feedback, right? And I think that was a question that Reggie asked earlier about feedback in general. One, you can do that through our tool now, which we've released just in the last week, where you can request feedback and give feedback. But even if you're using feedback in a tool like Workday or other kind of core HR systems, layering that over, and I think this is really where kind of leveraging the power of the API from Insights Discovery and then layering in the AI intelligence into those tools, you can actually help coach managers at the point in time where they're giving written feedback. It may not necessarily always be able to be in the room with people when they're giving that feedback directly, but what we can do is be in those spaces where people are providing written feedback to each other and really kind of helping coach them to say like, hey, this is how you're likely to provide this feedback to this person, but this is how this person actually wants the feedback. And so, type in, the few sentences and, we're going to walk you through how to make that feedback better and how it can land and prompt you with questions to really kind of support a better experience because consistently, and it doesn't matter which organization that we're serving or that we're talking to, universally people say we want our managers to provide better feedback, right? And part of better feedback is it's really two parts. One is more frequent, right? And then the other piece of that is it needs to be higher quality. It can't be superficial. It can't be. So maybe we got 3 minutes left. Sarah, if you want to talk about kind of the role of feedback and how personality insights can really help improve that feedback piece. Is that a challenge that you're seeing at VGM? And how has
Yeah.
either Cloverleaf slash personality insights really helped improve that?
Oh, for sure. I think that's a constant journey that we're on with leadership development, is just feedback, effective feedback, and clear as kind. We teach that. And so when we talk about how to give feedback, I think using a tool like Cloverleaf and somebody's insights discovery profile can really help us prepare and be most effective in delivering that feedback. So everybody is uniquely human in their own way. And so understanding a person before you interact, and if you're delivering feedback to them, is a critical way of getting your message across in a clear and kind way. So definitely we use Cloverleaf, and I even use it. There's colleagues that I don't always see eye to eye with, and so it's like, hey, help me prepare for a meeting with this person, or help me deliver. How do I best deliver bad news, or deliver this constructive feedback to this person? Super insightful, and I hear it all across our workplace. People use it in that way.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
All right, we're down to our last minute. Let me give a couple of quick closing thoughts and just logistics. First, I just want to thank Kev and Sarah for joining us today. Love your insights, love the experience, decades at this point. I know we're all measuring time by decades and our careers by decades, which is a crazy thought. And thanks for sharing those with us today. That's awesome. And then thanks for your time for being here today. Look forward to seeing you at a future Cloverleaf or Insights Discovery webinar in the future. And again, thanks, Sarah. Thanks, Kev, for your time today.
You bet.
Pleasure.
Thank you. Have a good day.